Thank you. As it has already been mentioned, I used to represent two main stakeholders. First of all, the academia, being a part of the academia, being a teacher of a translation department of one of the Ukrainian universities, and on the other hand, also industry, being the head of a translation company for over 20 years. So being in these two roles, or how the Ukrainians used to say, sitting on two chairs, when sometimes probably it's not very convenient, but I sometimes feel the gaps in translation students teaching even more than just industry representatives or academia representatives. And due to this, some 5 years ago, I conducted a survey with the two target groups, again, two stakeholders, the university representatives, academia. Those were the teachers of translation, practical translation, out of 21 universities, over 60 teachers, and industry, of course, translation industry representatives from 35 companies, and also over 60 experienced freelancers. I'm sure I see now some of them are present. Those who participated in the survey are present in the room now. Yes, so both parties were supposed to answer 43 questions about 43 translation competences, not interpreting, only translation. The competences were divided into 3 blocks: experience and qualification, linguistic skills, and technological skills. Of course, it was very tempting for me to take the EMT list of competences that the previous speaker was talking about, yet I realized, I understood that one of the target groups were industry representatives, and the list of EMT competence is sometimes very clever for them. So we tried to simplify it and make it clear to both groups of the respondents. So each competence was supposed to be graded from 5, which is the most important and needed competence, to 1, which is the least needed competence. I'm probably not going to speak about each portrait drawn by the competences by version of industry and academia. If we have time and are willing, we probably will discuss it tomorrow during the round table. Yet what I'm rather concentrated on and want to show is that, that the competences that were highlighted by one stakeholder, in this case industry, like the availability of professional experience, okay, it's not a competence, but very important, that's why we included it. The knowledge in the subject fields different from linguistics, which is also a problem, by the way, and so on and so forth. Yet, what was important and what I wanted to highlight is that the competences that were marked high by one of the target group representatives, I mean industry in this case, which is in dark blue, were not estimated as high by academia representatives, which is in red. And on the contrary, when it goes about the ideal graduate translator, young translator profile drawn by the competences by academia, well, one of the first one is the availability of the diploma. Being also an educator, I understand the motive, since actually we educators and teachers always work for the diploma. Yes, as you see, the same competences and items which were estimated very high by educators, by academia representatives, were not estimated as high by industry representatives, which proves very clearly that there is a huge gap between what industry needs and what we academia representative thinks the industry need. Yes, and also just a couple of words about the CAT. There is one more survey which is being conducted right now, a repetitive survey. I heard a lot of ideas that actually nowadays things have improved. I didn't feel it myself, but I wanted also to prove and find out myself whether things are changing for better. So we started another research. We do it parallelly now in Ukraine and in Poland, by the way. I most likely will talk about the final results with numbers in March at the conference in Krakow, at the CTER conference. Yet, what I can state for now about the Ukrainian part of the research is that out of the three blocks of competences, there are some changes, not considerable ones, but still there are changes in the instrumental or technological block of competences. As for the linguistic, interpersonal, professional management competence, no improvement so far. Alas, but this is the reality. To start doing something, we have to face it, we have to know it. Yes, speaking about the technological block of the competence, you know, a minute of advertisement. Yes, I'd like to say that maybe, if at least to some extent there are some shifts for better, it is also due to the project that we started, me and my company started some almost 5 years ago after the first survey, which is called CAT for Grad, Computer-Aided Tools for Graduates. And the idea of the project is to introduce the CAT tools and technology into the Ukrainian university curriculum. Initially, just some of my colleagues from other universities asked to help them to back up with developing the technology courses in their universities. But since the number of universities increased, we decided to make this project. And the initial point was only to give them access to free academic licenses. So this is the unique situation in Ukraine, Peter can prove. We agreed that for Ukrainian universities, actually with MemoQ it's even wider. Any university in the world can get MemoQ licenses for free, for nothing, academic licenses. For Ukraine, any CAT producer suggests free academic licenses, but this is not the problem. We initially thought that this is the problem. If they have the licenses, everything will be blooming. No. Also, methodological as well as technical support is also needed. So we help them to develop their courses, I mean technology courses. We help them to introduce them into the curriculum. So we try to bridge CAT producers and universities in Ukraine. And so far we have almost 17. I wrote here 17, we have 16 and a half. One university from Zhytomyr is going to join the program soon. And I also invite, we already talked to many university representatives during the breaks, so you're welcome. This is free opportunity for you to join and be up to date with the technologies. Yes, another point to discuss is the, some aspects in legal translation textbooks, the Ukrainian ones. We pick up several ones. Actually, for us, for me, it was not that much important which textbooks to speak about. So those were the four I had access to, and tried to analyze them as per most frequently used European criteria that I found in the European best practices, I mean, when creating the legal translation textbooks there. So the criteria are the following. First of all, the number of the branches, major branches covered. As you can see, the best, not the best, but traditional European practice is to take from 5 to 6, maybe even from 4 to 6 branches, legal branches in the textbook. As you see, in some Ukrainian ones, there are up to 20 branches, which is too much, actually, not only when it goes about the legal translation, but any specialized translation. It means spreading too wide, and as you know, jack of all trades is the master of none. So my feedback, being a part of industry as well, is that we should rather teach them to master several branches. And if they can do several branches and master it deep, then they will be able to master other branches themselves. So this is the idea. Another aspect is building subject field competence. Learn to think like a lawyer. Indeed, only in 1 out of the 4 textbooks, there was such a very short note that students expected to know comparative law, legal system a priori. And that's all. While actually, again, not only in legal translation, but in any specialized translation, there is a very, first testament. So don't touch and don't translate anything if you don't understand the subject field. So it works for legal translation probably even more. There should be, the background knowledge to be able to translate legal text appropriately, which is in no way fulfilled so far. In the textbooks, no tips or information given about it. Next, teaching the students source language and target language terminology. Things are not that bad there. Out of the 4 textbooks, random terms, glossaries were provided in 3. But what is also important, I should mention that the criteria is fulfilled only partially, is that it's only ABC glossary. So there is no interrelation, no connection between the term and the glossary are shown to the students, which is also not so good because it's a kind of simplified version. So students are given the terms to be learned, I mean the parallel source and target terms, and then which encounter in the picture text or example text, which the unit usually starts with. And then they are supposed to translate similar texts, which is not very good sometimes, since actually text may be different. And students will not be that good in translating other texts if they don't have if don't see this interrelation, interconnection between the terms. Then inter alia work, comparable texts focused on separate branches of law. To say it with plain words is that students should work with parallel texts, with good translation of the texts, with bilingual corpora. So far, of course, it's clear that we don't have that much corpora formed in Ukraine so far, but still, this is the message. This is what we should move to. Task-based learning, which in plain words can be called just exercises, all is well there. I wouldn't speak about the quality of the exercises, but they were available and vast in all 4 textbooks. And finally, from task-based learning to project-based learning. This is unfortunately that all 4 textbooks lacked. By project-based learning, I mean, and actually authors mean, actually perceiving any text that is to be translated in even 2 words text as a project with some preliminary pre-translation procedures, estimating the budget, dealing with the context, and so on and so forth, and translation proper and post-translation procedures. So no message of this is given in the current legal translation textbooks. Yes, okay. Of course, it's hardly possible to resolve all the problems and give unique pieces of advice, yet I decided that best industry practices probably could help, could hint how to resolve the problems. And then I realized that many of the best industry practices are already collected in the internship that we regularly conduct in our company, actually twice a year. One more internship is ahead in a week, I guess. So I will deal with some steps of the internship that we worked out in our company and that we've been practicing for probably more than 10 years, twice a year. So the first step is introductory briefing. I will not probably major on all the aspects, but the ones which are important for the competences and for the profile, I mean the translator's profile. So it's corporate style guides and trainings, and style guides and instructions from the client, which is also important since those are two testaments, again, client's instructions and internal corporate company instructions that are to be followed when translating something, to say nothing about translating legal texts. This is also could be simulated during the tasks, I mean in the textbooks. Reading of translations, which probably methodologists correctly would call inter alia work, source language and target language terminology. Well, this is, if you remember, what was lacking when we discussed the criteria which should be present in the legal translation textbooks. Parallel texts, work with parallel texts. This is what we do before we give simulated projects to our interns. So we give them a good amount of parallel texts which are already translated projects that can, first of all, help them to refresh the CAT tool, build basic terminology knowledge, so when they read parallel text, they can compare source and target text in the live context. So they study linguistic patterns, stylistic, grammatical peculiarities, and it works. It really works. And by the way, not only in legal translation, but in any specialized translation. Translation with a key, task-based translation, which is already connected with the exercises that can be in the textbooks, which presupposes it's a kind of internship trick. So we give them practical a real project, but on having completed the translation, interns compare their variant of translation with the key. So it can be one of the type of the exercises, task-based learning. And project-based learning. This is what current Ukrainian legal textbooks really lack. So no project approach. That translation is not considered to be a project with some preliminary and post-translation procedures. Okay, final test and final test assessment. This is also pretty important thing. Students and interns in our case are treated like we as a company are treated when we are doing some test translation. So there is assessment, feedback is given, what was nice and what was not that nice, as per well-known international mistakes typology. Conclusions. So the textbooks, and maybe if I can generalize the training of translators to be lacks focus, too many subject fields, and no intention to teach them how to master the subject field deep enough. Thematic competence, the background knowledge that would help the specialized translator or legal translator understand what the whole thing is about. Systematicity of terminology, not only glossaries, but also interconnections between the terms, among the terms. Training in contrastive textology, parallel text, parallel corpora, professional management competence, which deals with considering any text, even two words text, to be a translation project approach. And this is something, I mean, the tip of advice and the conclusion I want to make, to follow the market. Nowadays, not only in Ukraine, but all over the world, but in Ukraine as well, there are many professionals, and I'm sure many of them are even present now in this room, who are ready to share their experience with academia. So we are interested to share the experience for other generations of future translators are better trained, and we have better colleagues here helping us with our work. So the only way to cover the gap I was talking at the first part of my speech is to work at eliminating the issues together, to bridge the gap and to train better translators. Thank you very much.